Here we are standing in the courtyard of the Royal Academy of Arts in London, just before the opening of our major autumn exhibition, Degas and the Ballet, Picturing Movement. This is the first major exhibition devoted to Degas and the dance to be seen in London, so we're very excited to have it here because it was his major subject. We've been planning this exhibition for about 4 years. We've travelled all over the world to gather all the loans together, and it does cover the whole of Degas' career. There are about 130 works in the exhibition altogether, and it's a wonderful display of Degas as an artist of the dance, right from the very beginning when he tackled that subject, which is around 1870, up until the time when he more or less stopped working, which was about 1905. But we have a very exciting, new and interesting perspective on the subject of Degas and the dance, and that is the relationship between his work and what was happening in pioneer photography and the very first films in Paris at the time. Even in Degas' lifetime, people would ask him why he was so obsessed with the ballet, and he usually gave a rather cryptic reply which didn't tell you very much. But on one occasion he said it's because it's a pretext for studying movement, and the human figure in movement was at the heart of Degas' art throughout his whole career. And I believe the reason he loved the ballet so much was the action of the ballet, the choreography of the ballet, gave him a chance to study very sophisticated and complex movement. And strangely enough, he was the only artist of his time, and he's part of the avant-garde group at the time, the Impressionists. None of the others were really interested in the figure in movement to anything like the same degree that Degas was. But the people who were the photographers. And there was the British photographer Edward Muybridge, who spent a lot of time in America, and in particular the great French 19th century scientist Étienne-Jules. And Degas was very familiar with the work of both these photographers. They both publicized their work a lot in popular science journals of the day, such as La Nature, which Degas knew about and read. And they really pioneered the very split-second stop-action photography, where if you put it, the figures don't actually move, but it's as close as you get to the cinema before the actual invention of cinema. And we see a lot of influence of that, of sequential movement, in Degas' images of the dance. And then very interestingly, in the mid-1890s, Degas himself buys a camera. He buys one of the early Kodak cameras and starts taking portrait photographs, mostly of his friends. He was very interested in unusual light effects. He once said, "Daylight's too easy. What interests me is moonlight and lamplight." And he took 3 photographs of a ballet dancer. They only exist now in the form of small glass negatives kept at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, but we've made prints of them which we show in the exhibition. And then by a coincidence, the very year that Degas himself takes up photography, 1895, is the year when we see the first films by the famous Lumière brothers. And so in the exhibition we have a number of films of the Lumière brothers, one of a follower, an imitator of Loie Fuller with her famous Dance of the Veils, and other very early films of ballet dancers performing, which Degas would certainly have known about because they were all shown frequently in Montmartre, where he lived. And then we have a marvelous film by the Lumière brothers of a troupe of Russian dancers who came to Paris in the mid-1890s. And Degas made a whole series of pastels that are very similar, also of Russian dancers performing. And the exhibition ends rather poignantly, I think, with a marvelous film, just a few seconds, of Degas actually being filmed himself by the, at the time, young French theatre director and filmmaker Sacha Guitry, who caught Degas walking down the Boulevard de Clichy. He made a film called Ceux de chez nous, which had little clips of Renoir and Monet and great artists of the day. He went to see Degas and said, "I'd love to have you in my film." Degas said, certainly not. But Sacha Guitry went and hid behind a tree on the Boulevard de Clichy, set up his camera, waited for this great famous artist who was then in his 80s, it's just a couple of years before he dies, and captures him walking along the boulevard. And so the film ends, I think, the exhibition ends very beautifully for us with this artist who's a classic artist of the 19th century, but who lives into the age of cinema.